Yeah. Welcome to another edition of the People's Court. We are back with our second trimester report. It is All-Star Weekend, but we don't care about All-Star Weekend here. I'm joined by my good friend Tim Atkins. How you doing today, Tim?
What up, Lamont? How you doing, man? Good to be here.
Doing great, doing great. So
Happy
we're gonna skip.
Valentine's Day, man.
What's that?
Happy Valentine's Day, man.
Oh yeah, it is Valentine's Day. Or as some people like to say, Happy Singles Awareness Day.
You know what, though, man? Probably my favorite Valentine's Day of all time. It was spent with you.
Okay.
Do you,
I don't
you
think
have a guess at what it might be?
No, I do not.
It was the Valentine's Day that we got to interview Questlove at the House of Blues down in Anaheim. Me, you, Chris, Dom. I think maybe Dwayne was with us.
Okay, I do remember. I do remember going down to Anaheim to interview Questlove. I don't remember that it was on Valentine's Day, but
Yeah.
it was good time. But it was good. It was definitely good times.
It was a Saturday at All-Star Weekend, just like this weekend.
Hmm. Okay.
My all-time
Okay.
favorite.
So let's get on to it. Right.
Yes,
It
sir.
is All-Star. It is All-Star Weekend, and what that means is most teams have played about 50 games.
Yep.
And so, well, since All-Star festivities, not only are the two of us basketball junkies, we're also basketball snobs here. So we're gonna skip past the All-Star weekend yet again
Yes.
and focus on the playoff picture,
The important stuff.
the important stuff. There are several things that are really going to be interesting to watch down the stretch run, and we're going to start out west. Right now, there is a three-team race for the number 8 seed that is currently held by the Phoenix Suns. There's a game and a half separating them,
Yep.
Oklahoma City, and New Orleans.
Yep.
Who's getting that last playoff spot, Tim?
Kevin Durant. I mean, look, I'm a fan, so I'm biased, but I think now that those guys are healthy, those guys being he and Russell Westbrook, I think you watch them play since they lost to New Orleans, it just made them matter. And that's, I think, a storyline that people are beginning to talk about. But to me, what the anger of that team means is that this isn't a team that's trying to get the 8th seed. That's a team that thinks they can win a championship. And that's a very, very different way to play. And when you're doing that, your margin of error becomes very different. The intensity with which you play becomes different. And if that's the case, it seems as if the team that's playing just to make the playoffs probably slips a little bit more than the team that's trying to win the championship. And Phoenix has really faltered in the last couple of weeks, and I think it's going to get worse for them. Injury bug has started hitting New Orleans, and if Anthony Davis has to miss any extended period of time, it's a wrap for them. My money's on Durant Westbrook.
I'm probably gonna agree with everything you just said and say that the Thunder get the playoff spot. Back when Durant and Westbrook were both out, I figured if while those two were out, if they didn't stay at 500,
Yep.
there'd be too much of a gap. But
Yeah.
there's not,
It's
and
closed. There's no gap now.
like there was never that big of a gap. Like they've managed to make up ground. They've beaten in the last week and a half. They've beaten both New Orleans and Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I think the key word you said earlier was angry.
Yeah.
Like, well, Russell Westbrook always plays angry, but I think
Yeah.
that spread to us. I think that spread to the tall, skinny dude.
Yeah.
Cause what did he say? A few weeks ago, they signed Nick Collison to another extension, and a former ESPN writer tweeted something about that. See, what his thoughts were, and Durant responded angrily to it. He got into verbal fights with Dwight Howard earlier in the season. The last time they played the Clippers, Chris Paul tried to do his Chris Paul thing, and you can see the Vine video where Durant just says, "Yo man, you down 20."
Yeah, exactly.
They still have their weaknesses in that after Westbrook and Durant, the fallout, the drop off in talent is still a big deal. It's huge, probably bigger than it is with any other team.
I don't think people who talk about the game really appreciate and show enough respect for what appears to be the Oklahoma City game plan. And that is like they frequently draft big guys that seem like it's redundant. It's like, well, why did they draft Mitch McGary when they had drafted Steven Adams the year before that? Like, why wouldn't they have taken Clay Anthony early, for example? There were those kind of questions, and it's the same questions you ask every year in the draft. But when you take the long view, it seems like the management there has a plan. Like, we know that Collison is old. We know that Perkins is old. We know that these guys are going to leave us at some point. So we want some young guys in behind them. Like they seem to have a long-term plan that nobody really talks about and shows enough appreciation for, because it's just so much easier to say, boy, look at those guys. Weren't they dumb for trading James Harden and getting nothing out of it? It's just easier to say that. But, I mean, the truth seems to be, like, Steven Adams goes down this week. What happens? They throw Mitch McGary in, and he puts up, career-high numbers. Even though he's a young player, he still puts up big, big numbers and is super productive in very important games. Like, I mean, how can the proof not be in the pudding?
Yeah. Like Steven Adams is out for 2 or 3 weeks with a broken right hand,
Yeah.
and when he went down, Mitch McGary came up, and I think he put up close to a double double if he didn't have a double double in one or two games. The downside to Steven Adams being out is more Kendrick Perkins, but but they really like Kendrick Perkins in Oklahoma, so
They do.
um, and the James Harden trade is going to hang around them unless and until they win a championship.
Yeah, I agree. Sad, but I agree.
We're going to stay out west here
Yes, sir.
and talk about and ask the question: how good are the LA Clippers?
Ooh, oh man, I'm afraid. Can you go first?
So right now here's their current status. I believe they're fourth in the Western Conference. I forgot their standings, but Blake Griffin is out indefinitely. He just had a bursa sac or something. His elbow drained, a staph infection, whatever it was. Supposed to be that was last week. He's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. They've made a ton of mid-season moves, but they still have no bench and virtually no wing depth. DeAndre Jordan on the bright side is having his best season.
He is.
Chris Paul is quietly still reminding everybody that he's the point guard.
He is.
That's still the point guard.
Yes, he is.
Can they finally break the question that I have is can they finally make it to the conference finals and potentially beyond?
That's tough, man. I'm gonna go no. I mean, I just pulled up the standings and talking about them, they're lumped in what is essentially the second tier of their conference. They've got 19 losses, but so do Dallas and San Antonio. That's good for 5th, 6th, and 7th place at the moment. And Portland and Houston both have 17 losses in 3rd and 4th, and then Memphis is at 2nd with 14 losses, and Golden State in 1st place with 9 losses. So it's kind of a tiering effect at the moment that you could kind of see that those tiers will probably change whoever the people that are on them. But to answer the question, I just don't think they have the right matchups. I mean, they seem to run into teams like Memphis that just knock them out. Or last year they got knocked out by Durant and them. They just don't have an overall advantage when it comes to potential matchups through the Western Conference bracket. Like somebody, one of several teams usually, is just their poison, it seems.
Yeah, this is probably the toughest conference we've seen in a long time. So everything's going to depend on injuries,
Yeah,
matchups, a ball bouncing your way, a call going your way.
yeah.
I don't think that the Clippers are going to break through, and break through meaning they're going to make it all the way to the finals. I just don't think they have enough. For the past week or so, they've been trotting out lineups that has Austin Rivers, Jamal Crawford, Glenn Davis, Spencer Hawes, and Hedo Turkoglu. I realize that rotations are going to get shorter in the playoffs, but if the lineups like that are playing any significant portion, like there's such a drop off. Like
Yeah,
their bench is so bad. Um, I don't even know why Hilo Turkoglu is on a roster, but he is. Same thing with Glenn Davis.
yeah.
Spencer Hall's played well in their first game without Blake Griffin, but for the large part, he's been a disappointment this
Yeah,
season.
really. I thought he was
Uh,
going to be a big difference maker for them. Like on paper, what he brings to the table seemed like the perfect combination of things to come in and as their third big man being, 20, 25 minutes a game, but he just hasn't done it.
no, he hasn't fit in as a largely this season. Maybe that'll change, maybe not. Um, and they have no depth on the wing. Like Matt Barnes is pretty much out there by himself, along with
Yeah.
JJ Redick. Matt Barnes was never. Basically, they have nobody to guard the Kevin Durant's and Mike Conley's. Well, I guess you could, like their best wing defender right now is probably Chris Paul.
You know what though? I think maybe that's a little overrated. The idea that you have to have a LeBron stopper, because you poke around the league. Like, okay, so suppose that they have to play Memphis, right? Who's Memphis got on the wing? They got Jeff Green. Like Jeff Green is very good and he does a lot of things very well, but you don't need a particular guy to stop him. You play Portland, it's Batum or it's Matthews. Like again, you don't need a stopper. Same thing. Houston, you go down the line. They're probably guarding Trevor Reeves. If it's Dallas, somebody's got to guard Dirk, but nobody in the league can really guard Dirk. So it kind of becomes a whatever for me. Like the idea of needing a wing stopper. I mean, maybe I agree that you need somebody behind or other than Matt Barnes, but I'm just not sure that that's necessarily the ingredient that takes them from where they are now to being sort of a can't miss pick for the conference finals or the actual finals.
Yeah, maybe you definitely have a good point there. Having depth on the wing might be slightly overrated, but
It matters. I just don't think it matters in the way that we often talk about it, because we often talk about LeBron stoppers and Durant stoppers, but those guys exist in kind of rare air. They're not common. Every team doesn't have that.
I still don't see the Clippers breaking through.
Oh, I'm with you. Neither do I, man. I'm good with
I,
that, man.
I think on the other hand, I do believe that they have the number one offense in the league.
Oh yeah, the
And
Zach Lowe thing from a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
yeah, and their defense isn't necessarily that bad,
No.
but their hope is maybe should someone like Kevin Garnett or Amari Stoudemire get bought out,
Yeah.
their best.
Intriguing.
Maybe those two guys, one of those two guys might be able to help some playoff team.
Let me ask you this question: do you enjoy the Clippers?
Uh, that's a very good question. I guess the lines have been drawn. You either love the Clippers or you hate them. I'm gonna lead towards the hate side with the Clippers.
Really? Okay. Why? Why hate?
Um, I forget which game it was. It was the game where Chris Paul criticized Lauren Holtenkamp.
Oh yeah, yeah. The young referee.
Yeah, the young rookie referee who you just see it. You just see it. Like in that game, it's probably the game that we mentioned before, where Kevin Durant, where Chris Paul stared at Oklahoma's bench, and Kevin Durant was like, "Yo, you down 20."
Yeah.
And they proceed at that point the Clippers proceeded to get 5 or 6 technical fouls in one game. They've consistently led. They've been tied for the lead or have outright led the league in technical fouls for the last 4 or 5 seasons. They don't really their only really likable guy is DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah.
You know,
Everybody seems to love that guy. I don't know
yeah,
why.
he's their most likable guy, and
Yeah,
that includes Jamal Crawford and
yeah.
everybody else, and he's not likable enough to make up for the fact that you that they're tough to watch. They're not always fun to watch playing. I mean, their histrionics. Um, their histrionics make them unlikable.
If you rewind time and go back to say 2010, 2011, back when every time they played, there would always be the people on Twitter saying, you got to put on the Clippers game because Blake is doing X, or you should have seen what Blake just did, or you should have seen DeAndre do this, or you should got to see Chris Paul that. Like, actually, maybe that would have been before Chris Paul, but idea being like they were the team everybody loved. They were clearly the most fun. But here, a few years later, with a much improved roster that should be a championship caliber team, like now they're kind of loathsome. How crazy is it that things have transformed that significantly in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, the other thing too is, if we rewind the clock back to last last April with the
Okay.
whole Donald Sterling fiasco, you would think that
Yeah.
everybody would have rallied around them by now.
Very
But
good
I
point.
but I do think that the Chris Paul stares, the Chris Paul
Ugh.
flopping. Um, it was funny to watch JJ Barea outflop Chris Paul last week. It was kind of funny. They both flopped on the same play, and I think
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think they called offensive foul on Chris Paul. Um, even the little Blake Griffin stares
Yeah.
get make them less enjoyable to watch. Blake is this season is playing further away from the basket for whatever reason. A lot of people are trying to figure that out. He's not doing as much of the Blake Griffin things as he's
Yeah.
been. He's doing different Blake Griffin things, which I think is which I don't think everybody is quite appreciating. There was
Yeah.
an article not that long ago called Blake Griffin Lob Generator, where they give him to the ball mid-high post where he's facing the basket, helps got to rotate, and guess what? He can throw a 30-foot high pass to DeAndre Jordan, and that's all. And that's
Yeah.
and that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, no, I don't like watching the Clippers play.
Okay. All right.
You're tuned into the People's Court with my guest Tim Atkins. I'm Lamont Peoples, and let's take a look out to the colder side of the country,
Oh boy.
and ask the question: Have the Cleveland Cavaliers fixed all of their problems? They've made a few trades that everybody knows of. Brought in Timothy Mozgov,
Yep.
J.R. Smith,
Yep.
and Iman Shumpert.
Yep.
LeBron James is back to looking like the king since he took his little
Indeed.
two-way sabbatical, and they're now where are they now? They are
Kind of lumped into the middle there. I want to say they have about the same amount of losses as Washington and Toronto.
they they are
Chicago, sorry, Chicago,
yeah,
Cleveland, and Washington. They're all within a game or so of each other in the loss column.
right. So are they looking like the title contender that everybody predicted before the season started?
Short answer, yes. Yes, I think we all knew before the season started with the lineup that they entered opening day with, they were going to have issues with defense, particularly with rim protection. I think it's kind of where Mozgov comes in. He shores them up on the defensive end, particularly with regard to rebounds and a little bit of rim protection. He's not a shot blocker in the same way that, say, Tyson Chandler or DeAndre Jordan can kind of control that space on the court. But he's just so big. And when you look across at the rest of their roster is really short. They got a lot of guys that are 6'8"-ish and that don't necessarily have super long arms, like an Elton Brand would have had super long arms at that height.
Right.
And, they're okay in terms of rebounding and they're okay in terms of the quickness of their feet and moving around to places, but they just, outside of Mozgov, they just don't have that guy that eats up space in the paint and creates problems for whomever is trying to get inside.
Yeah, I think just average rim protection
Yeah, and that's
Especially
okay.
once Verja went down. Average win protection, average rebound. Mozgov has played really well. He's fit a need for that they desperately needed.
Yeah.
Um, at and then I think adding Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith, even though I don't think we've yet quite seen bad J.R. in Cleveland just yet. At least I personally have it. But the fact that they're there means that, well, Deion Waiters is gone, and they don't have to play at guys like Mike Miller and Sean Marion as much. They don't have to rely on those guys as much. Maybe depending on how the game goes, one of those guys can come in for 8 to 12 minutes
Mhm.
and provide them with something. But but I think those two guys fill the void. At least give them something more. I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but just something better than what they had.
That's good, man. Something better. That works for me.
Something better. And we talked about LeBron. Kyrie I think has done some Kyrie things,
Oh, yeah.
and yet even with all this winning as of late, they still have their weird issues.
What
Kevin Love
bothers
is
you the most?
what's that?
What bothers you the most about them?
Uh, they talk too much.
Oh, okay.
So again, there was this weird thing out on Twitter having to do with whatever LeBron James like talking about thick, Kevin Love should have more confidence in his shot. Something about fit in, fit out.
Yep.
First he admitted it was about Kevin Love, then he said it wasn't, then he said it was, then blah 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 blah. I just want them to stop talking. I just want them
Yeah.
to stop talking. For as well as he's played this season, I'm trying to wonder what type of leadership approach LeBron seems to have. Like it seems like he's trying to figure this thing out on the fly.
Kind of does. Yeah.
Um, everyone assumes he's de facto head coach and de facto general manager, and also, in addition to being leader on the court and best player on the planet, it seems like he's trying to figure this thing out. It seems like he's just trying to figure this thing out. So, but and the question still remains: is Kevin Love the odd man out?
That's a tough question. It looks like he kind of is, but part of the question is, I think, a flaw because recently there've been a couple of different things on the internet about how odd Kevin Love may in fact be. That he's a person who apparently appears to be incredibly introverted to the extent that he doesn't do all of the simple, silly social things that guys on the team would do. Those aren't really important to him. So it's kind of tough to get him to participate in that, and therefore it's also kind of tough to get him to buy all the way into the whole idea of team as family. And if in fact that is true, and I have no idea whether it is or not, but if it's true that LeBron believes in team as family, everybody does everything together, you do all those silly things, but then you have on the other hand Kevin Love saying, if in fact he believes, well, I'm good, I go to work, I go home, and I'm straight. Like, if if LeBron is Magic and if Kevin Love is Kareem, based on their personalities, then can those two guys get along well enough? It worked okay for the Lakers. So it's possible that the difference in personalities is not a deal breaker and would not leave any man out. But we're so early in this whole process, we just don't know the answers yet. In fact, we don't even know what's really true because none of us are in that locker room with them.
Right, right. So like there was another interesting thing, as far as about Kevin Love being the introvert.
Yeah,
All those years when he was in with the Timberwolves, his only friend on the team was I think Corey Brewer,
that's what they said. Yeah,
and that's it. Whereas we saw the whole family thing with LeBron when he was in Miami, and it sounds like he's trying to get that same type of vibe going with his Cavaliers teammates, and maybe Kevin Love just isn't going to be a part of that. And if that's the case, and if that's so, um, then so be it.
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be, you know, that they have to part ways, or that it should hinder how they play together on the court.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to stay in the East Coast, and with the other team that a lot of people were predicting to make the conference finals, and that's with the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, yeah.
You know, here's what I find weird about Chicago.
What is it?
They have a better record on the road than they do at home.
How much better?
19-9 on the road, 15-11 in Chicago.
That's strange, man.
Their defense is currently on pace to be the worst in the Tom Thibodeau era.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, I think so. The combination of Joakim Noah, Pau Gasol, and Taj Gibson hasn't necessarily always worked, at least in the eyes of some people.
Okay.
And then sometimes there are times when they look interested and can beat the world, and other times when they don't. So how far can they go?
Man. I think a lot of it depends on how the seeding shakes out. You know, because if it's a 4-5 with them against Cleveland in the first round, you know, they could be done in the first round because you don't want to play Cleveland in the first round. You just don't. You know, if they have to play Washington, maybe it's a 3-6. You know, a lot of it depends on where they land because that Eastern Conference is so weird in the 3, 4, 5, and 6 space that any one of those teams that is going to land there could potentially make the conference finals. And you have a couple of teams, notably the Bulls and the Cavaliers, who could conceivably win the championship. So it's just a really, really weird mix of the different potentials of the teams. I would say, all things being equal, I think that the Bulls team is still in a position to get to the conference finals. They're still in a position to get to the finals. I think they're still in a position, if the right things break with injuries and matchups, I think they can still win a championship. I am not off of that bandwagon. I'm not on it necessarily. I'm a Powell fan, so I'm hoping that guy gets a chance to go very far. But I still believe in their potential.
Yeah, I'm not ready to write the Bulls off either.
Nah.
I'm like you, a lover of all things Gasol, both of them. And I also think that at least the last few games that I saw them play, that Derrick Rose is starting to figure out how good this new version of him can be.
He is, yeah.
He may not. I think he's starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if he does, and if they can stay healthy, I think Jimmy Butler is out with what do you have? A separated shoulder, strained shoulder, something wrong with his shoulder.
Yeah.
You know, if he could come back, he could come back. He kind of slumped during the month of January, but if he could come back from the break and start playing like he did earlier in the season.
Yeah. I don't think that what they asked him to do is sustainable across 82 games. You know, because they were asking him to be the number one wing defender, guarding 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4s. And then they were also asking him to carry either the second heaviest or the heaviest load on offense. Like, I don't care who you are, what kind of shape you're in. That's just a lot. Like, you see, even LeBron breaks down and needs some time. Like, I have to go to Miami and do whatever he did in Miami in order to get right physically. It's just too much.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I'm not mistaken, Jimmy Butler was leading the league in minutes played.
Yeah, he was.
And those were they were heavy, and he is playing the most minutes, and those are heavy minutes, as you mentioned, guarding the other team's best offensive player, and having the carry and being the second option offensively. It's not necessarily easy to do for a full 82 games. So I'm not ready to give up on the Bulls. And which leads to my next question.
What's that?
You have any finals predictions?
Man, I've been put on the spot. I'll go Golden State and Cleveland. Before the season, I was thinking Cleveland and the Clippers, and I'm off of the Clippers bandwagon. I don't see it happening. I'm on the Warriors bandwagon. So that's what I go with.
I think I started the season on the Warriors bandwagon, so they've done nothing to throw me off. So I'm gonna pick Golden State,
Okay.
and I'll pick Chicago. I think I was on their bandwagon. I think I was on their bandwagon just by one of their preseason games that I watched. I'm
Okay.
gonna stay on that. I'm gonna stay on that too.
No Hawks. Why no Hawks?
Just because I don't like to change my mind. I don't like to admit when I'm wrong.
How do you feel about the Hawks? Are they legit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, they're absolutely legit. The best thing that used to describe them that can be said about them is that their rotation players 1 through 8, maybe even 1 through 9. None of them have a glaring weakness that you can either take advantage of or B have to cover up.
Okay. So what's the secret to beating them in a series?
I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe nobody knows.
They are a little. If you can pound them on the offensive glass, I think you can do that. I think they might. Teams like Washington with Nene and Marcin Gortat can probably give them problems down low, at least an edge in rebounding and whatnot. But there really is I don't think they don't have a weakness really.
This is a little bit of an aside. It's not meant to address that question. It would be fun, even though it may or may not be within the bounds of the NBA rules. It would be super cool if one NBA team, just for one game or even one quarter, tried to play a box-and-one defense on Kyle Korver just to see what would happen. You know what I mean? Like, how much fun would that be to watch? Because that would be just crazy.
It would be. Again, here we are talking. It's been said a lot about how how teams have the defensive game plan for Kyle Korver.
Yeah, no,
And that and it's a real thing. And again, he's not. And this might be the first time I've heard this much talk about defensive game planning for a player who is not the primary ball handler or a low post player.
I think honestly, the Hawks are they are the dream of everybody for the last 15 years who said, "Oh, I don't like the NBA. I watch college. It's so much better." Like, people don't understand. People who say that still, like, they don't understand that the style, everything that they thought they liked about college is now the default way to win in the NBA. You know, where you have deep rotation, you have defensive players all on a string, so that you don't have any weaknesses really. It's very much team oriented, and more importantly, you win from three. You construct an offense that's built on spacing, and you have an outsized advantage if you have a team that can make a whole bunch of 3-pointers. And it's like, to me, if you go back to the college game, like watching Kyle Korver, not every night and not even for every quarter, it's a little bit like watching a guy like Jimmer Fredette when he was at BYU. Because he's just a guy that's so unstoppable as a shooter that teams really do gear their defenses to trying to figure out. They play as boxing one, they might play a triangle and two if you got two shooters. Like, they play these weird gimmicky-looking defenses because they just don't know how else to try and guard this guy. Like, a single-man coverage or even, like, team-on-a-string coverage is oftentimes not enough.
Yeah, I don't know how you beat the Hawks. I'm glad I'm not an NBA coach.
Me too.
I'm glad I'm not an NBA coach in the Eastern Conference because I don't think I would figure it out. And I don't buy into that lack of quote unquote star player. That they don't have the star go-to guy to down the stretch, or whatever the case may be. I think we've seen the transition from hero ball.
Yeah. I disagree with you a little bit. I don't think they have an obvious star player, but I think when it comes down the stretch, it's understood that Jeff Teague is going to control the fate of the Hawks. And that's good, because he's exactly the right kind of point guard to be put in that position. and it's he's almost the purest kind of point guard because of that. And so he doesn't need to be the household name that Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul or Steph Curry is becoming. He just needs to keep doing his job, and that team is successful regardless of whether they're up by 20 or whether they're slugging it out, with the Grizzlies, and trying to win a 3-point game.
They said this. They had their starting five on an NBA TV interview, and
Yep.
I think they summed it up like the question was asked, who's taking the final shot? I want to say Millsap pointed to Korver, but everybody else was like, we don't know.
Yeah, but
And
I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, my point is I think that's a good thing. I think that helps them because if they don't know, the defense surely doesn't know, and the defense
Yeah.
can't focus in on any one guy, just like the rest of the game. If
Yeah.
a play, if you run a play or a set in the second quarter of a regular season game in February,
Yep.
that's gonna get you a good shot. There's no reason why you can't do the same thing with 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter of a playoff game.
Yeah.
And I think mid-sentence I changed my prediction. I'm gonna go with Atlanta. I think I'm gonna go with Atlanta to come out the
He
East.
changed his mind. Oh, history is made.
Let's get to the next fun part of our show.
Yes,
we're
sir.
not gonna go with mid-season MVP awards. We're not gonna
Nope.
we're not gonna go with any of that. You came up with this great idea, so why don't you explain to the people you came up with this great idea for two unique awards. So why don't you explain what these awards are?
Okay, so I appreciate you saying those were good ideas. That's very, very kind of you. And we'll explain them by saying that in keeping with the theme of the People's Court, the two awards are most deserving of parole and most demonstrably guilty, or the MDG, which is a very different take on the MVP, sort of the opposite of that. We can start with the MDG, the demonstrably guilty. Boy, that's a mouthful. That would be the personality, be it a player, a coach, an owner, broadcaster, GM, anybody who has done the most harm to their franchise. So, Lamont, who do you think has done the most harm to their franchise thus far this season?
I'm gonna go with my old childhood hero, the guy I think who's just fallen. Not fallen, but one Irvin Magic Johnson. He's in the news again. Last week I think he went on. It was ESPN's First Take.
Mm-hmm.
And was yet again criticizing Jim Buss, Mitch Kupchak, Jim Buss, blah blah blah, whoever the case may be. It's not the first time he's gone on record criticizing Jim Buss,
Mm-hmm.
but he just needs to stop.
Yeah.
Like he just needs to stop. He owns the Dodgers now. I don't know. Talk about the Dodgers. Everyone's gonna affiliate Magic with the Lakers. He's gonna be a Lakers for life. But he just needs to stop. Like he's not. It's been 23 years since his last significant basketball moment.
Yeah.
And that was what I'm talking about. I think it was the '92 All-Star game.
Yes.
Yeah, which came after he announced that he was HIV positive. So we are now seeing a crop of players coming into this league who didn't even see that.
Oh wow, that's true. Wow.
Right.
That's
Well, then he went on to play on the dream team. But you're about to see a bunch of players coming in who don't remember that.
How old is Anthony Davis, for example? How old is he? He's like
21.
22? He's 21.
21, 22, somewhere, something like that.
Well, he was born after all of that.
I think so.
Crazy, man. Crazy.
So and but he's still NBA royalty and deservedly so. So anytime he has something to say about the Lakers, it's going to register.
Mhm.
If it's negative, then it just makes them look bad. It makes like, okay, well, if Magic Johnson, a Laker for life, is criticizing the Lakers, why would I want to sign there?
Yeah.
So he's hurting his family, or for lack of a better word, from the outside in. Just need to stop.
History is very interesting to think about because I think one of Magic's biggest shortcomings is he has no memory of the Lakers between the time they traded for Kareem and the time that they drafted Magic. Like there was a period of time in there, let's say 5, maybe 6 years, where they had some terrible teams. They had one or two teams that were, conference finals good. I want to say that the year that the Blazers won it, that Lakers team had Kareem, and they were very competitive with the Blazers team that ultimately won a championship. So they weren't bottoming out necessarily. Like they had Kareem, they had their corner piece, but they weren't a championship team necessarily. And they had teams where he was the best player, kind of like when Kobe, like circa '06, where they had the best player in the league, but they were an awful team. And if with Magic not having that memory, his most recent comments to me suggest that he's just out of touch. Like he's talking about, oh, we have to get a free agent this summer. Like, never mind who those free agents are. Like the guys that are available or could be available this summer aren't exactly guys that would definitely come to LA, nor are they guys that would definitely change the Lakers' fortunes if they came to LA. Like I think Magic's problem is that he lacks the history, so he doesn't have a sense of how long it takes to rebuild. Like we have to get ourselves all the way out of the Kobe era before you talk about what comes next. And there are pieces that seem to be emerging. Obviously with Julius Randle, you got maybe he's part of the answer. Maybe Ed Davis is part of the answer long term. Maybe Jordan Clarkson is part of the answer long term. We don't know for sure, but we're starting to see. And I think if you focus on, like, say, the class of 2016 and 2017, those are better classes to be thinking about because then you might, and I'm personally hoping that we see this because I think it would be insane, you might see both Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis land in LA. Because if their teams don't go in the places that they want their teams to go, why wouldn't they try and team up together and be like the most nuclear combination of players in the history of the game? How much fun would that be?
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to get too much into
Yeah, I'm sorry.
that.
I'm sorry.
No. I don't want to get into that too much into that future
Yeah,
Laker hashtag that you see on Twitter, because I'm like, I do agree with you that we kind of have to end the Kobe era all the way
yeah,
before anything can, for the Lakers can, like, the Kobe era would have to end
yeah.
before the next thing, whatever that next thing is for the Lakers, and I have no idea what it is.
You know, to
But
to the original MDG question, like honestly, you could talk about people like Boogie Cousins or somebody in the Kings front office is doing the most harm to their franchise. You could talk about somebody with the Knicks, maybe it's Carmelo. I don't think it's Phil Jackson, but I'm sure some Knicks fans would not be happy with him. Maybe it's somebody with the Nets. There are different people, different with different organizations that are really, really suffering a lot of harm. But I just feel like I'm with you, man. Like given how highly Magic is regarded, when he speaks kind of out of turn, and when he does so in a way that suggests he doesn't really know what he's talking about, like whatever is true of the game today is kind of gone from him. He's in a different level of business, and he just doesn't seem to have a good sense of, all right, like I don't think he knows how to run an NBA team. And I think if you put him in charge of an NBA team today, I don't know if he'd be successful.
yeah, I don't know what his end game is,
Yeah,
but
I don't either.
he can't seem to resist the opportunity to ring on Jim Buss.
He did good for a while though. He had maybe 8 months, maybe a year where he didn't say anything negative. Like he had made some pledge, like I'm gonna be all positive from now on, and he did good. It was a long time. I don't know the exact stretch of time, but it was a long period of time. He just kind of got caught, like he couldn't help himself.
Right. Right. I think I read something where he stopped. He didn't say anything negative from about a
Maybe
year
it was a
ago,
year. Yeah, that's a long period of
a,
time.
a year ago, and then yeah, and then he goes on TV last week and says what he
Yeah.
says. Your other award, I think you described it as people who have played well or have done something well are just stuck in a bad situation.
Yeah, the most deserving of parole.
So who's most deserving of a parole?
I personally I used to be jealous of Aaron Aflalo, so I'm gonna go with Aaron Aflalo. Because he's a guy that's kind of a quiet professional. I mean, he makes a pretty good wage. I think he's in the 7 to 8 million range per year of contract, and he's been that way for maybe the last 4 years and maybe the next 2 or 3. Like it's a fairly reasonable contract for getting a starting two guard who's able to defend, who's able to shoot the three. I think he may be past his peak as a player. He's not flirting with all-star status or even all-pro status the way he did for those 1 or 2 years when he was at his peak with the Nuggets teams that had, I think, the last year of Carmelo and maybe the first year after when they were kind of built around Iguodala and they made a lot of noise in the Western Conference. But I just feel like you never hear anything from him. He's a guy that he comes to work and you only ever hear like that guy is one of the hardest working people I've ever seen. That's the only thing you ever hear about him. And regardless of whether you think he's still at his peak, he's off his peak, whether he's underrated or overrated, I mean, that's a guy that could be very productive. Like if he were able to be on a team, imagine him on the Clippers, for example. That would be pretty amazing for him. Or if you put him, I don't think Memphis needs him, but boy, that'd be intriguing. I mean, I'd hate to give up on Courtney Lee because I love Courtney Lee in that role. But put him in a position, a Flalo that is, where it's a better position for him, it's a better fit for him and the team. It would just feel like, man, that guy would actually be able to do some good in his career as opposed to just getting him checks.
Yeah, I think him and his Nugget teammate Wilson Chandler. I think those are two guys that could certainly help somebody with the Clippers. Clippers being, of course, being a leading candidate. We talked about their lack of wing depth and that they don't really have anybody behind Matt Barnes and J.J. Redick and
And put a follow on the Bulls, man. We were talking earlier about Jimmy Butler. Like, give Jimmy Butler some help on the wing. Man, that'd be
he would definitely. I mean, he would probably be a vast improvement over Kurt Heinrich.
Yeah, I like Heinrich, but he's not guarding the two guards, and he's not guarding threes for sure.
Yeah, I have no problem with Heinrich. But he's just not. He's just not. He doesn't move the needle enough. For his grittiness. But those two Denver guys could definitely help Chicago. I think someone who probably needs a parole, who's
that?
Needs a parole, and I just thought of this, who's really good at his job, but is NBA on TNT host Ernie Johnson.
Oh wow! Why Ernie, man?
Everybody always says that they're the best basketball show on TV. But I think at some point, like sometimes I see him in the middle trying to do his job, and Charles Barkley and Shaq are doing whatever it is that they're trying to do. They're going off script.
Yeah.
I think maybe sometimes I think he gets a little tired of it.
Huh. So what do you do instead? Like if he gets paroled, where does he get paroled to?
I don't know. Or maybe he doesn't get paroled. Maybe they just bring new people in.
I like this thinking, and I'm going to tell you why. I think the same problem that Magic has is kind of the same problem that Charles Barkley, for one, has. Like, he's been off the court for so long, and the game has changed so much in what seems like a relatively short of time. I think he's out of touch, because I think, him talking about the analytics, I mean, that's a really legitimate argument, like how much emphasis you give some of the newer analytics. I don't have a problem with that level of discussion, but just to dismiss them out of hand, it just makes you seem like a cranky old man who's resistant to change. And I feel like I stopped watching the TNT show. I like the starters on occasion. I don't watch them every day, but I like them because I feel like they have a better sense of how the game is changing and like how to make the game fun for people who are junkies. But I think so many of the people that work for, I like Jalen Rose for ESPN. Like if you gave Ernie Johnson, if you let him pair with Jalen Rose, maybe it's Doug Collins, maybe somebody else, that might be a good way to get him paroled. But I wouldn't want to see Sage Steele or Doris Burke lose that spot because I like both of them in that role.
Right. Barkley is always entertaining, but
he is
not always smart.
Nah.
And Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I think it might be maybe he's just been maybe Charles has been at his current job for far too long.
I agree with that. I was feeling that much earlier in the season when everybody kept saying over and over about this guy is the best two guard or this guy's the best two-way guard. Like, why did it matter that Klay Thompson was this and James Harden was that? Like, why did those things? Who cares? Like, I mean, it feels like people were talking about the wrong things, or it felt like people were talking about the wrong things, and it just seemed like they were trying to perpetuate arguments for the sake of perpetuating their own presence on TV. And by comparison, I think when you watch the starters or when you watch Jalen Rose and Doug Collins and Sage or Doris, like they're not trying to perpetuate their presence on TV. Like they're actually watching the games. They actually kind of care about what's happening, and they're very curious about what's happening. And I think all that stuff bleeds through. Whereas with Barkley and Kenny and Shaq, they care about entertainment. You know what? I'm turning around, man. It's not a Flalo. It's Ernie Johnson. We got to free Ernie Johnson. I'm with you.
Yeah. There's nothing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being entertaining. I don't always, but I think maybe those three guys have been together for too long. It might be time to break up the team.
That show is basically the Saturday Night Live of NBA. Like, it's an institution. It can be really good at sometimes. Culturally, it has a place. It matters. But, in terms of the actual game and the actual stuff that goes on, like, it's not that important anymore. It's just, it's out of touch.
Definitely. That'll do it for this edition of the People's Court. You can find us at http://thepeoplescourt.fm. I want to thank my guest host, Tim Atkins. You can find his blog at what's your blog at, Tim?
Oh man, I'm really not blogging much these days. I'm online somewhere. I read some old stuff. It was not very good. I probably should not be polluting the internet.
Well, thanks for coming along.
Thank you for having me, man. It was fun. A lot of fun.
We'll see you next time.
Cheers.